invite Dr. Naser Refaat, CTO of Rotana Group, Peterka, CTO of Verimatrix. Petr, you'll probably have to pronounce your name and introduce yourself. Mike Barley, who's the non-executive chairman of FACT. And we have with us Moderator, Alex Borland, who's the head of media sales EMEA at Ericsson. Alex may be head of sales for Ericsson, but in a previous life, we're told he did something with anti-piracy. So thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Vijay. Afternoon, everybody. So we will try to work through this as quickly as we can so everybody can get to their lunch. I know everybody's keen to get on and get some good networking done. So I think we're very fortunate, as Vijay was saying, to have a great team available and provided for us today in terms of great seasoned professionals from different parts of the industry. So Mike very much in the operational part of anti-piracy, dealing with cases and building cases on a regular basis, and we'll come on to that. Petr very much from a technology standpoint, talking very much about the capabilities that are available in technology terms. And Naser from a regulatory framework, but also generally within the marketplace and understanding the overall dynamics of this market very well. So we have a great panel for us here today. So we're going to talk about the operational and technical strategies and challenges that we face today. I'd like to start with Petr, yourself. Could you give everybody some understanding of the technologies that your company and other technology companies provide in this space, and particularly how they can be used and to good effect, and how effective you see them being in the operations that are deployed today?
Well, absolutely. Technology is certainly helping the pirates, right? They are taking advantage of the fact that broadband is available. They are taking advantage of, quick re-encoding and all of these things. So we have to use technology to help our case. And there are different aspects of technology. One is the prevention. We use cryptography, conditional access, and digital rights management to prevent the leakage of content to unauthorized users. The second step is you actually have to have traceability of where the content came from. We talked about prosecution and different methods of plugging the holes, but if you can't figure out where the content is coming from, then you don't have a place to start. So forensic watermarking and fingerprinting and technologies like that are certainly part of the overall solution. And lastly, somebody actually mentioned that we have ability to collect a lot of data from the end-to-end distribution chain, and understanding what's happening in the network, in the devices, how people consume content, what they do, how they do it, actually provides us a lot of information where we can trace piracy in ways that we couldn't in the past. Thank you.
And Mike, from your standpoint, you work very closely with the technology arm of the business, I know, in some of your dealings and your work to bring some of these criminals to justice and really working at an operational level. Can you explain maybe some of your experiences in how effective, some maybe in places where you've been very effective and other places where you see challenges and still work to come?
Okay, so using technology is absolutely key to try and get ahead of the pirates, and we've used it quite effectively over the years. Just last week, 2 people were sentenced in the UK to 4.5 years imprisonment for using or selling Cody boxes. 4.5 years in prison is a good sentence. But we use technology, we use search tools to find out, to discover this information. We use a search tool that sits across, and I didn't know this, but there are apparently 36 auction sites. So it sits across all 36 auction sites. It sits across social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the like, and searches for key search terms. It's harnessing that information. Harness that information and make good use of it to bring about prosecutions. And just a point on prosecutions, if I may, and go back to the early discussion when they were talking about would you prosecute a 12-year-old. I think that
14, I think he said. But
was it 14? Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. But whilst there may be a need for that, I don't think it's always that necessary. And I can only relate to my experience in the UK, and I'm sorry for sort of keep on going back to that, but we operate a strategy in the UK which is a multifaceted approach, and it's a phrase that Martin Stewart used earlier on this morning. And the multifaceted approach is you either deter, and you deter through public awareness. You disrupt, and the question I asked earlier, which was a follow-on from Petra's question to the panel around engaging with the advertisers, engaging with the payment providers, and disrupting the activities of the pirates. And the last part of that strategy is one of detection and prosecution. And it's right to bring prosecutions, I believe, at the right level. You want a prosecution to be impactful, so that the impact of that, people read about it on social media, and they think, I'm not now going to go down that route. Going to prison isn't worthwhile. So I think, but you know, it's that sort of multifaceted approach to piracy is effective. Prosecutions need to be brought, clearly they do. They need to be brought swiftly, and it's through the use of technology in whatever format that you're able to harness information in the first place. And if you don't ask me another question or go on to Naser, but I mean, the information that you harness is of great value in this space. And I'd like to see much more collaboration with using that information that we all gather in individual silos. But if we made better use of it, we could have a much greater impact in the fight against piracy.
Thank you. So, I mean, it sounds like 4.5-year jail sentence sends a very clear message into a marketplace that this is not acceptable. So, Naser, for you, within this region and the strategies that Mike's talking about there, is this something that you see being used correctly in this region? Are there strategies put together that are effective? And is there an underlying framework that really supports those strategies, because you need that to be effective in the marketplace?
I think today we have seen in the CEO panel, they have touched on the coalition which is coexist, which is quite fruitful. However, there's lots of points being missed, and as they agreed at the end of the session, they said there's a lot more to be done. Now, the core issues, to put a framework, we have to go and dig into the real problem. The real problem is regulation. I agree with my colleague Walid when he stated that MENA, especially North Africa, and Africa in general as well, has much bigger issues than Dubai or UAE. One, we don't have a centralized registration for any content per se. Content in media, we have films, we have drama, we have clips, we have documentaries. Luckily enough, Egypt is the only country, if there are films and you want to sell a film to Dubai TV per se, you go to the cinema chamber or chamber of cinema in Egypt, you get the certification. So the buyer knows he actually has the right. Taking this aside, any film produced in UAE, Lebanon, Algeria, Morocco, where does they register? No place. How would you, as a buyer, make sure that these are the rightful owner and you're getting the rights for it? None. Most cases they find, as discussing with Walid a while back, the pirates are not really pirates. The pirates had bought content with a contract from an XYZ who claimed they had the right to sell. So he goes to court for 3-4 years, try to prove that not, and he cost the organization arm and a leg. Eventually, we say, let it go. So, one, I go back to the same issue. There is no centralized authentication body within the whole MENA region to make sure that you are actually buying from a person who has the rights to sell you. So this has to be sorted. Second issue, When we talk to satellites, yes, I agree with the coalition and good work. We have put down 80 or 85 channels, but you're missing the point. You'll keep doing this forever intentionally. Why? Because we need to push into the main source to have these regulations filtered down, which is ITU, International Broadcast Union. So within the International Broadcast Union, we have to have a regulated law stating that satellite owners are responsible as well as we are for piracy, and they need to take action. Now, everybody is running as a headless chicken continuously, with lots of meetings, but endlessly because we're missing the point. So we said first, centralized registration for rights, out of which I, as a buyer, I can go online and find out whether you're truly selling me first window or second window or not. Second, we have to push in the ITU in terms of regulation, so everybody would be happy, so you can shut down any channel, anytime. Third issue, we do have monitoring body. NBC has a monitoring body, OSN, Rotana. We monitor like 110, somebody had 120 channels. And we keep chasing the channels and trying and use this monitoring body that they were able to bring 80. But hey, where is the transparency? Every content owner says he has the largest library. Rotana, we claim we have the largest library. ART, they claim they have the largest library. What are the number of films registered in the coalition database? 154, is it? Thank you. Now, transparency is an issue. And it's a cultural thing in the Middle East, unfortunately. So we have to be more transparent. So we say centralization, we say the ITU, and transparency. Now, moving forward, technology, back end. Most producers, as TV networks, yes, we do invest in fingerprinting and we invest into watermarking and on. However, this is for our channels. What about the rest of the channels that we sell them? No. Why? Again, we go back. Telcos and satellite operators, they are not willing to invest on this unless we, as TV producers or TV owners, we pay for them. Fine as a service. So simply, again, we go back into regulating this to be part of the fees. I'm paying, or Rotana's paying, like 100K per mega in Nalsat, and X number in whatever. Make it 101, and have everything fingerprinted and watermarked. So we say centralization, ITU, transparency, and then integration with telcos and satellite operators, but hey, as well with a central monitoring unit. Not segregated as it is. How could this be done? It has to be enforced from top down. Yeah. The only way that you can enforce from top down is you go into the top. We say governments, no, we go above the governments, which is we go to the Arab League, the Arab League Union. Now there's initiatives in Egypt with certain bodies of intelligence to start this union to address particularly this issue. It is not for free. Now, I'll give you an example. When Walid goes and sells a movie, he goes to Egyptian Chamber of Commerce and he pays like $1,000 fee just to get a certificate that Rotana are the owners. Rather than paying pay the union. And naturally, it will segregate into the telcos, into the satellite operators, and it's all win-win situation. Each transaction, there is a model being discussed now. So this is my view, in brief.
So, okay, so thank you. So it sounds like you're quite dissatisfied with how the region is operating right now.
Waste of time.
And I think a lot of it, I think, as Petr was saying, you know, Petr's company and many companies like his provide some great tools and really good technology that can be used very well. Mike, you've talked about how you can use that and to good effect, but it is about organization and structure. within an entire region. So Mike, could you give us an example, just a very specific case that and just explain how operationally and tactically you've been very effective in deploying, making use of technology and actually getting a great result for a company or for the industry?
I mean, the case I alluded to earlier.
And talk about the organisation and who was involved and how that worked a little bit. Thanks.
So the case I alluded to earlier was one which affected primarily the Premier League. And we used a technology that was that search tool that I referred to, searching across the auction sites to find the sellers of Cody boxes. And having identified, and of course, of which there are many, there are hundreds, if not thousands. You don't just pick on one seller. You look at how many products they've sold and do your research, your due diligence into their background and start effectively put together an investigation. And you build that case against them. And if you realise that actually these two people in the UK were selling an awful lot of Cody boxes, their criminal gain from selling was at about £1.8 million. And excuse my lack of the ability to transfer that into dirhams.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. But it was using that technology that enabled us to identify those individuals in particular as key sellers. And as I said earlier, these are the ones that we needed to say, right, there's a prosecution that needed to be brought there. So FACT works with the Premier League in that space and goes to the Premier League and says, we've identified this, or these individuals in this case. And FACT will put together the evidential pack, and it will be supported with technical background, technical information. They'll do some test purchases, so they'll buy some Cody boxes. In the UK, where they're fortunate because the courts understand the need or the crime of piracy, and that's why they'll pass out the sentences of the length that they did in that particular case. And it's not about the losses that a company, Sky, BT Sport or Virgin Media or whomever it may be, loses. They work on the basis of the criminal gain. And as I said, these two individuals made £1.8 million over a period of time. And the courts accept that piece. So that's just one case. And there's plenty others over time. One of the earlier cases, and I mentioned this to Alex beforehand, on piracy, and I keep on referring back to the UK, for which I apologise, but that's
it's your experience, but they're good
experiences.
Right? Great experiences.
It goes back to 1998, and there was a chap then, Christopher Carey, who hacked the Sky card, and he was prosecuted for it. He walked out of prison. He got a prison sentence, and he escaped. He didn't escape. He was in an open prison, and he just walked out one day to do some gardening and kept going. He stopped when he got to New Zealand. But we found him and brought him back, and he got sentenced to 4 years imprisonment for escaping and finishing his sentence. And that sent such a message on what was then the social media forums, but it wasn't what we see today. But it sent such a clear message that you don't steal content. The impact of that was fantastic, and it ran for years. And sentences like the like I've just mentioned does have an impact, and that's why I say about having a strategy that reflects the deterrence factor, and that is really important.
And you use the press to good effect in this as well?
Yeah, and it's about getting the press on board, and companies like Sky want to sort of front up this sort of publicity. Sky, OSN, any other company wants customers come to us. They don't want to be saying we're going to prosecute our end users. We accept that. Organisations like FACT quite happy to front up that publicity. And they've worked very hard over the years to get publicity around these types of cases. Generating that sort of publicity raises the awareness not just amongst the public, but amongst the judges too, because the judges read the papers too. And they see these types of things. There are in the UK sentencing guidelines. So somebody will be convicted of an offence and the judge looks at a tariff or a matrix and decide on the sentence. But seeing that type of sentence has the right impact. And I just want to go back on a point that Naser made about, I think you said the need for it needs to come from top down. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'll go back to the point I think it was Martin Stewart made. There needs to be an act of will. It's just a coming together of people, like-minded people, like people in this room here today, to do something about it. Unless the people in this room do something about piracy, nobody else will.
I agree with you and disagree. I agree with you, it's wellness that does things moving forward. But I disagree that there has to be standards, regulations, processes that protects an auto flow of protection. Yes, we can do publicity and we can do newspapers and social media, but hey, we're missing the point.
I think actually we were saying the same thing in some extent, because you need that underlying, and you've been very dependent on the underlying infrastructure in place in the countries you've operated in, Mike, certainly, to be effective. You need that judiciary support, you need the regulators to help you, and I know that you work influencing the regulators and making sure that they're keeping up to date and moving forward and pushing the boundaries further, particularly as we move more into the digital age and streaming of content, etc.
And I understand, sorry, Petra, the difficulties in this region where you're operating in different countries where you have different judicial systems and different law enforcement agencies, and it isn't easy, I accept that. I established an organisation of which Petra is a member of, which is APA, which is the Audiovisual Anti-Piracy Alliance. Bit of a mouthful. But that sits across Europe and has 24 different members. And it is what it says, it's an Audiovisual Anti-Piracy Alliance. So we have broadcasters and technical companies sitting around the table discussing various issues. It's a bit of I wouldn't say it's an enforcement agency because we recognise that's quite difficult, but APA has bought prosecutions with different companies signing up to a criminal complaint. And that's had some success as well. It's a bit more of a thought leader now. I think it's transferred more of a thought leader, but engages with the European Commission, talks about directives, and it's taken some time to get there, but unless we can talk to the regulators and say, actually, as an industry, we are a voice, and you need to listen to us, we're never going to move that dial.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, we talk about technology, but we also talk about the legal system. And one observation I made is that a lot of the legal cases take years. They take hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to come and bring to prosecution. And in some cases, they have big impact, but in some cases, they don't. When you use technology effectively, and when you actually integrate it in the right points in your distribution chain, and if you detect piracy, and I think today we have technology to detect it in real time, and you identify the source, and in many cases, these are your subscribers. They are legal subscribers. They pay you money, and then they obviously steal your content and redistribute it. But if you can detect it in real time and turn that subscriber off,
you can close them down. You
can close it down like this. And yes, you can continue with the prosecution and make sure that there are no repeat attempts to this. But my point is, if the technology is used consistently across the distribution, you have other tools that can react much faster than the legal system.
So a technology linked with an operational strategy can be that effective that it can work in real time and effectively be disruptive enough in the hacker's network and his consumer base to the point where actually you can deter.
And disruption is a very powerful tool, because if I'm actually paying for a piracy service because I want to save money, but many of these services are paid services, or even if they are not, but they are advertisement supported, but if I rely on it as a source of my entertainment or access to sports, but if it's not reliable, if I can't see the game to the very end, or if it gets disrupted in the middle, am I really going to go back next weekend? Or am I going to start thinking about maybe buying a legal subscription?
Yeah.
Just on that point, I mean, it's a great point, and wearing my other hat at Sky, we do exactly that. We look at, take a paid-for sporting event, and the best examples are sort of the recent Anthony Joshua boxing matches. So we employ technology to identify that subscriber, because from that one viewing card, he will sell the ability to stream content to others who sell it on. So
to thousands of illegal users.
To thousands of end users. And we look to identify that as they advertise on the internet. And I say to the guys that you switch that card off when the bell sounds at the first round. And it's massively disruptive because when that bell sounds at the first round and thousands of screens go blank, the people at the end of it are fed up.
So they've paid some money.
They've paid
and then
some
they've
money.
Had it switched off.
And
at
they've
the
got
moment
switched
they're just
off.
about to start.
Yeah, and then we look to prosecute that subscriber. You have to take that out and you have to send that message. So the idea is not, all right, I want to make those people convert to buy the proper package. You don't want them all just to be there out in the ether. You want them to buy the proper package. And that's why I come back to sort of this disruption strategy that the industry needs to employ.
Let me ask you a question.
Absolutely.
Could I ask you my question?
Please.
Okay. There are nearly 1,100 Arabic-speaking channels, okay, out of which 80% are free-to-air. They're not cable. Cable, yes, we have control over shutting off people. How would you manage free-to-air? How would you shut it off?
Free-to-air is a very different, it's a different business, and I accept the point. I mean, it's not easy. I'm just using the example on a paid-for platform, which is the premium platform. But I accept the point about free-to-air.
But what we're saying is there are multiple strategies, right? I mean, there are some that can be very disruptive, that are very near to, and can happen in real time, and there are some that cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, but end up in prosecution, but that's time and effort. On an international front, Petr, maybe I can ask you this. How do you see the big internet giants in this mix? Are they a help or are they a hindrance to the business and for the pirates?
I think when we see it in a global scale, Naser made a point where there must be consistency. If one person is protecting content and the other is not, then the pirates really go to the place where it's the easiest to get the content and not be traced or not be prosecuted. So one of the problems that the industry, I believe, has is the inconsistency in requiring certain technological content protection techniques. And we had discussions about watermarking. It is relatively new. I mean, the technology existed for many, many years, but it hasn't really been used effectively until relatively recently. But you run into the problem of you have pockets of the world where it's used and pockets where it's not. And then people use it as an argument. They say, well, if the content gets stolen from the place where it's not used, then why did I spend money on watermarking my content? So consistency across regions and across the world is really important.
So international treaties is really what we're getting to, which is not easy to come together. Right?
Both international treaties, but also the content owners, right? They sell content to different regions. They need to create this consistency in their agreements.
And there's a social awareness amongst the big internet companies, but they equally play the game of the open access and data access for consumers. That they run a fine line on balancing that, but at the same time that they have a responsibility. They have a clear responsibility of something which everybody here who talked about a lot today is theft. It's theft at the root of this, and people seem to forget that too readily, I think. So they have a responsibility here. Mike, From your experiences shutting websites down, is it really that fast? Can it be done that quickly, or does it take a long time and a lot of effort?
Look, it does take, of course, it does take some time because you have to be certain that you're shutting down the right website. But going back to the earlier point about the internet giants, it doesn't need international treaties. It just needs, wouldn't it be great if you ran this conference again next year and you had Google and Amazon
in the room,
sitting in this room? Wouldn't it be great? Because they're the people, they are, loosely, they're in our supply chain. How is it that I can type into that Google search bar, free Premier League sports, and Mr. Google gives me a drop-down menu of things to choose from? Shouldn't happen. That's a bit tongue-in-cheek, I know that. But the point about it is that we should be engaging with them a lot more than we currently are. We managed to get Amazon to adjust their search terms by lobbying them and saying to them that Kodi boxes or fully loaded Kodi boxes is something they will not now carry, because they realised that they were facilitating, in a very passive way, facilitating piracy. It also goes on to advertisers. Criminals will want to use adverts on their websites to give them a sense of legitimacy. And I think the point was made in the previous discussion that a lot of advertisers don't recognise or don't realise that their logos and their website, their adverts are appearing on pirate websites. I was at a conference in Hong Kong 2 years ago talking, and the advertisers were in the room. And this was a conference run by Casbar, John Medeiros and his group. And they're making progress with the advertisers. There's a question I asked earlier, shouldn't we, as an industry, be engaging more with the payment providers, something we're doing in the UK? Because pirates are only in this pretty much, 99% of them, I would guess, are only in it for one reason, because they're making money. So if we identify a seller, a pirate of some note, and let the payment providers know, saying, this person is using your facility for criminal gain, do you want to be associated with that? The answer I know already is no, because I've been talking to the payment providers. They'll carry out their own due diligence to check the veracity of what I'm saying to them, but they will stop them using that facility. Now, that's not going to stop the pirate. It just means that he's now got to find an alternative payment mechanism. If that's Bitcoin, fine. I don't know how many people in this room have got a Bitcoin account. I suspect it's very few, if any at all. But it's just about disrupting them and driving them into the smaller and darker places, the internet, that people can't really find.
So there's a strategy of following the content, protecting the content, and tracing the content, but there's also a strategy around following the money flow very clearly, and working backwards from the money flow to understand where that's coming from, where the sources are, and actually blocking payment gateways and other things like that. So that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that that's something that's applicable and could be applied in the region, Naser?
Definitely yes. Definitely yes. I know the Middle East is far behind Europe, UK, and US. But with persistence and cooperation of everybody in this room, I think we can make things happen. We can take from the experience from the UK, what they have applied and how they've gone about the processes and on, and pass it on to this region. But to do this, we, as I mentioned before, in this region, it's culturally wise quite different. Piracy, it is born as a normal practice.
It's acceptable.
It is unfortunately, it is acceptable. It's unfortunately. Not by all, but majority. So the solution only is whether we continue losing our content and continue producing more, just to know, as somebody has suggested to a while back, to know the trend, or to put a stiff regulations from top down, covering all corners, and make sure that we've got it right, and spend more time and efforts between everybody here to go and push for proper regulations across the line.
So a lot of it is really collaboration, whether it's
yes.
international collaboration with local regional collaboration, whether it's collaboration between technology and operations people, but also judiciary and the underlying regulatory bodies. All of these things matter. I mean, it's taking a holistic approach on all of this that really matters, and that's what could make a difference.
Exactly.
But one of the points I picked up from you earlier, Petr, was talking about hackers and using hackers. Is that a risk, or is that from a strategy point of view for a technology firm to make use of hackers to understand? I mean, I know that it has to be done because to some extent, to understand the hack, you need to be involved. You need to pull it apart, take it apart, technically reverse engineer it. But can you effectively use a hacker against their not necessarily their organization, but that industry?
It is a very sensitive question, but you do need to understand how the bad people think, how they are going to attack your system, and which part of your end-to-end distribution network has the weakest points. You may be spending a lot of money on one area, but if this is wide open, then you haven't really, achieved anything. So understanding how they do things is very important. And yes, you can hire them. We talked about white hat hacking, and it's becoming a trend in the industry. And it is good to bring, these really clever minds to the right side of the industry. They certainly do it for money. Sometimes they do it for fame. But if you bring them, pay them enough money, let them speak at conferences, you can achieve similar things. The other point is that
So it can be a valuable asset.
it is a valuable asset, but you have to be very careful how you pick them, right? But it is important because your engineers don't think that way, and when they are designing a product, if they don't understand how it's going to be attacked, they'll never really design it properly.
Yes, yeah, of course. So they're advisors to the business in how you build things.
Right.
Yeah. So, Naser, from a market perspective, I think you said earlier that you think that there's a lot of change needed in this region, particularly. Do you think that we're winning the battle? Do we think? I mean, we heard from the CEOs this morning, looking at the future, feeling that actually we're going to the right places. Do you think that we are winning the battle, or there's still a lot of work to do to get to that point?
We're just delaying. We're not really winning. You're taking down 80 channels. Next day, there's another 80 channels comes up. You take websites with dynamic IP. In a minute, another server comes up. So it's a continuous battle.
Yep.
And a struggle, and we do appreciate all the efforts everybody's doing to counter piracy. But I'm very optimistic that by next year, this time, we'll be hearing lots of success stories in terms of achieving major milestones of getting to the optimal goals, which is stopping piracy in MENA. So I'm wishful.
That's positive. And Mike, from your experience, you've had a lot of years operating in this environment. I mean, from a UK, a Western Europe perspective, and then also how that applies here. I mean, how do you see it? Do you think that you're ahead of the pirates and you're keeping pace, or extending, going beyond them?
I don't think in the UK that we're ahead of the pirates. I've been working in this now for 18 years. And I think that we're at a place where we've been successful to a point where we've displaced the problem. And certainly it's sad to see that displacing that problem means it affects other areas of the globe. And maybe MENA is one of them, Asia Pacific is another. So success, what does that look like? Does it mean that we have no piracy at all?
I don't think you'll ever get to that place, though.
I don't think we get to that point.
Any of us believe that.
But displacing the problem certainly has an impact. But displacing it means it becomes somebody else's problem, which is not a good thing to do. But in the absence of eradicating, that's all we can really do is displace that problem. I'd be happy if the pirates went off and played with I was going to say Microsoft or PlayStation or something, but maybe I shouldn't. But we want them to go and do something else, or do play with somebody else. I don't think you can ever be complacent about it. I mean, certainly in the UK, where I don't see an awful lot of piracy on the Sky platform itself, but we see it on others.
So you've been effective displacing it
Yeah,
to Sky's
which
competitors.
is tough. Of course it's tough. But that only underlines the argument about a greater collaborative approach.
Yeah.
So that we try and do more to eradicate it. My worry, and it's still a genuine worry, is that unless we all, the people in this room do a lot more, we won't have the TV industry as we know it. We did a survey in the UK a little while ago, and it was amongst pirates. It was about people not pirates, people who stream content, people who consume pirated content. And there was a comment made by one person, and he said this. He said, streaming content is like driving down the road at 32 miles an hour. Well, the speed limit is 30. You drive down the road at 32 miles an hour, nobody's going to do anything about it. You know it's wrong, but nobody's going to do anything about it. If that same attitude occurs within the audio-visual content space, then we've got real problems coming up.
Yeah.
We have a whole generation of people who think it's okay to stream content because it's on the internet. That has a massive impact on this industry, the creative economy, and broadcasters. And that really quite worries me. It's about changing the mindsets of people. And you can only do that really by raising awareness and using the media to greater extent. It's not just about putting in there that this chap got sentenced to whatever it was, fines, prison, whatever. It's raising that whole awareness piece around the dangers of streaming content, the dangers of you visiting pirate websites. But the Industry Trust is an organisation in the UK that does a lot of work in this space. And they came out with some research a while ago that said that and I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was a majority of pirate websites either have some form of malware on them or there's a credit card scam behind it somewhere. So there are inherent dangers in that. But that message needs to be got out to, I would suggest, to the sort of the 10 to 15-year-old age group. It's that age group that are now looking at the internet, using the internet, thinking because it's on there, it's free, therefore it's not a problem. That age group will become the house owners and the payers of content later on, or not. And I suggest that they won't, unless we do a lot more about it now.
And it sounds like that's part of your strategy very much, is
Educating
Educating
within
and
the region.
controls. Educating and building control mechanism that integrates and covers each corner. Partial resolutions is doomed to fail. So either we take it as whole or we go home.
It's a big task.
But we also talk about a lot of the, top-down, but I also think it starts at home. We talk about children. They are our children. Are we teaching them that going to these websites and stealing content is stealing? They know they shouldn't steal a DVD from the store.
I hope
I think
nobody in
it's
this
very
room
clear.
teaches
Right?
their kids that.
Yeah.
They know stealing a DVD is wrong,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't do it in front of you. But are we as consistent with that message when it comes to digital content?
And teenage kids will always push the boundaries, right? That's what they do. That's their nature.
I
It's in their
think
nature.
They will do, but I'd like to think, and sorry that I keep referring back to the UK, but kids at schools these days know it's wrong to buy a fake pair of jeans or a fake handbag for the girls, but they don't know it's wrong to steal content. They don't know that it's wrong, and that's the difference.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I think yes. So we're I think
We
we're
can
done with
talk
the
over
questions.
lunch.
So appreciate it. Have we got any questions from the audience?
Any questions?
There's one over there, Virginia. Oh, a couple.
More of a statement, I think, than a question. But
You'll get into trouble for that.
As long as you can hear me. As a former employee of Sky in the UK, it's certainly I'm aware that Sky have been really enforcing policy to catch these bad guys for more than 25 years. I think that's something this conference needs to understand.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually, and I'm aware of this. Sorry, Mike, but I would like to say, as a consumer of Sky, and I've seen this and been in the industry for some time, you've been hugely effective in combating piracy, and in a very collaborative way across the whole of the UK market with the other operators as well. So I think that's it's an accolade, but it's also it shows you what can be done with the right mindset and the will and determination that I think Sky have put into it, the money they've invested in technology, but also in the people to be effective, to make a difference, and it really has borne fruit.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, it's a good point. Sky spends about £6 billion a year on acquiring content. If you're going to spend that sort of money on content, you've got to spend to protect it as well. I'm not saying, and you should be proportionate. I'm not saying I've got a massive team of people at Sky, but as you say, it's been working on this for 25 years. This is not a quick win overnight battle. And the question was asked of the chief executives of where do you see us in 5 years' time? There was a lot of hope in their responses, as I said earlier, but it's down to the people in this room. We're the movers and shakers. We're the doers here, and that's what it needs.
But, I mean, regional differences for sure, no question, but there's a lot of learnings that can be taken away from other places as well and applied here, I think, that there's value in it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.